guys, today we're going to be reading Mr. Seahorse by Eric Carle. Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist this way and that. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," she said. "Can I help?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes, thank you," said Mrs. Seahorse, and she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." I love how brightly colored he made the seahorses in this book. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpetfish hidden in a patch of reeds. Do you see them there? There they are. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest, and right away Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch." "Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. It's another daddy who's taking care of the fishies. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. Do you see him through the coral? There he is. I love lionfish. They are so interesting looking. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. I know," said Mr. Seahorse. "Mrs. Tilapia laid her eggs. Now you are taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. He couldn't talk. His mouth was full of eggs. Do you see all the eggs in there? Another daddy fish taking care of the eggs. A lot of the other animals, do you know, it's usually the mom that takes care of the babies. When we learned about squirrels in the fall, the mom stayed and took care of the babies, right? But all the fishes in here, it's the daddies that are taking care of the eggs. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. There are the leaf fish. Do they look like leaves to you? But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Curtis?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtis. "Mrs. Curtis laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch." "You are doing a good job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Mr. Seahorse is upside down. See the eggs on top of his head? When we learned about penguins, it was the daddy penguin that carried the egg around, right? So that's another similarity there. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind a rock. I don't see that stonefish back there. There he is. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Couldn't be better," replied Mr. Pipe. "Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You should feel proud of yourself," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Bullhead?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Tip-top," replied Mr. Bullhead. "Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs hatched. Now I'm babysitting." "You are doing a fine job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Look at all his little babies. The time had come for the Seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that. At last, the babies tumbled from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tried to come back into the pouch. "Oh no," said Mr. Seahorse. "I do love you, but now you are ready to be on your own." Did you learn anything new in that story? There were a lot of different fish that it talked about, and how they laid their eggs, and who took care of them. And Mr. Seahorse, every fish he met along the way, he said really encouraging, kind words to the other fish, right? And how proud he should be, and how kind of him to be doing that. He was really responsible with the eggs too, right? He wasn't bouncing around or doing anything irresponsible. He was taking really good care of them. Has there ever been a time in your life where you were really responsible about something and you felt really proud about that? Think about it.